Hey everyone, this is Joe Martin. I'm excited to have Hadi with me here. He is the excellent founder of code.org and has a really great resume as well from lots of fun companies that I've always admired in the tech space. And I love code.org. This is probably one of the favorite interviews that I've set up because my kids use it quite a bit in school, and I've also been a big promoter of them for a while on social media. So grateful we could get some time with him today, and I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much. And I didn't realize your kids are students of ours, so that's wonderful to hear.
Absolutely, yeah. They thought it was pretty cool that I was going to be talking to you today. So, I'd love to hear about just kind of what inspired code.org, what led you to really wanting to put that effort into bringing that to the masses and educating the future generations.
So, I started learning to code on my own when I was 9 or 10 years old. And I was growing up. My life story is really what inspired the work that I do, because I was born in Tehran, Iran, and I grew up in Iran during the Islamic Revolution and the war with Iraq. And through that time, basically, learning to code was my escape from the harsh reality of the life I was living there. And when I came to the United States as an immigrant, it basically was the sort of entryway to the world of opportunity and the American dream. And after 20 years of building a career in tech, working at large companies, founding startups, investing in startups, what I realized is everybody in technology is struggling with this challenge of it's so hard to find great software talent. And meanwhile, at a time of income inequality and all the problems in our world, why is it that the best paying jobs in the world are the hardest to fill? And it's because education isn't teaching the basics of computer science to every kid. And I grew up with this. So for me, computer science was never like this mysterious thing. It was just something that was as easy as anything else you learn in school. But for most adults, computer science and coding feels like black magic. And we're used to things that we've learned. Like if you ask somebody about red blood cells or the digestive system or photosynthesis, they don't get confused like, oh, I don't do red blood cells, or I don't talk about plants. I'm not a biologist. You're comfortable talking about those things because you learned it in biology class. Mm-hmm. And people should be just as comfortable speaking and discussing technology with the level of knowledge that you can learn in a 10th grade classroom. And the only way to do that is for every single school to teach computer science, just like it teaches biology, chemistry, algebra, the things that we expect everybody to know the basics of.
That's a really great point. It's something I hadn't thought about is just we learn all these really basic things that we may not ever end up using. So, why not start people on code and see if they actually have an affinity for it and get them moving into the right direction. I'd love to, before we dig in deeply on code.org and mission and other things that you've created there, what are some of the things, you've invested in a lot of startups, like you said, what are some of the other qualities, not hard skills, right? Like coding, obviously, if it's a techie person starting a company, but what are some of the soft skills that you really like finding in founders?
So as a investor in startups, if I had to pick one thing that's most important to me, it's persistence. Having been a founder myself, I know that creating a startup is not easy, and seeing it all the way through success is not easy. In fact, I've not been successful every time I've tried, and in fact, my least successful effort at creating a startup has always been when I gave up. And I've done things where I later thought, what, if I'd stuck with it, maybe it could have turned out better. Persistence is so important for entrepreneurship. Just putting in the hard work, knowing that even when it seems impossible, that we're still going to do it, rallying the troops with the sort of optimism that there's a greater future possible. That's more important really than any individual skill.
I love that. Yeah, persistence, consistency, just really showing up. I think it's so important. With all the success you've been able to create with code.org, does anything stand out specifically, a milestone or anything, or maybe there's something in the future that you're really trying to reach for right now?
Well, if I had to think of special milestone. I agree with people who say that, creating something isn't like one flash of a great idea in a moment. It's like hard work and, all the time you put in. But there is one thing for code.org that really was a special flash, which was coming up with the idea for the Hour of Code campaign. And the Hour of Code, the concept is that anybody can learn just for 1 hour. Any teacher can host an hour of code in their classroom. And so why don't we get millions of kids just learning 1 hour of code? And the reason this is a great idea for us is both because it's easy to just give an hour, but also 1 hour is enough to learn that computer science is easier than you think. It's more fun than you think. It's more creative. It's more about expressing yourself. It's less about like skills and drills and hard work, and it's more about fun and creativity. The idea for creating the Hour of Code is probably the greatest idea I'll ever have in my life. It led to a global campaign that has had, I think 1.8 billion times students have now tried an Hour of Code. Never in my wildest dreams would I have envisioned creating something that has had that level of educational impact. So that is for sure in the rear view mirror, the most incredible milestone of my code.org journey and honestly my life.
That's so cool. Yeah. I worked with Scott Belsky. He's the founder of Behance and is SVP at Adobe or whatever nowadays. And he called it the messy middle, when he was founding Behance. And I think to your point, like that campaign was probably the child of like 10 other campaigns that led to it, right? Sometimes you can't get straight there. You've got to kind of zig and zag, and eventually you land on something that really works well. Yeah. But it's that persistence that you mentioned and kind of continuing on. You highlighted kind of the importance of teaching cybersecurity, obviously with AI and lots of other things coming about. What do you think that can do to really help the future of technology?
I would say in general, code.org, the name suggests coding, but we're about computer science. And computer science includes coding, computational thinking, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. These are all different fields of computer science. And so we aren't just teaching coding in schools. We're teaching kids, how computer viruses work, how to protect your software, computer, your digital identity, even digital safety, digital citizenship. These are things that everybody needs to know. I think everybody right now has like a fear of getting hacked or getting, digital crime is a greater fear people have than fear of burglary or sort of physical crime. People are more concerned about losing their online identity than they are about losing their physical goods, at least in the United States. And if you think about it, the greatest risk to our cyber safety is our own lack of proper cyber hygiene or just lack of knowledge. And the reason it's important to teach is because even one person can be the weak link that causes things to break. If you have one person in your household that isn't doing the right things with installing software updates, they could cause your network to, they could get a virus on their device, which then infects your computer because you're on the same network.
Right.
We need our parents and grandparents to all learn. So the only way to get everybody safe is to make this part of the school system so that everybody learns basically cyber safety, just like we teach things like fire drills.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think cyber safety, finance, like there's some of these little things that are not taught that really should be building blocks for a lot of other things. Where do you kind of see AI fitting in as a teacher and in the school system and how that kind of develops? I mean, my oldest son is in middle school. They all have Chromebooks, and that's obviously foreign to me. So where does AI fit into the next generation?
AI is such a horizontal thing, changing all sorts of things, that it's going to fit in many, many different ways. Like it's going to make teachers' lives easier because it automates some of the things that teachers do. It'll take out the busy work of things like lots of homework grading, for example, can be done by AI, or preparing lesson plans can be made easier with AI, etc. The most important thing, though, I would say is, there's individual applications of AI, like making it a personal tutor or making it a teacher's assistant, etc. But I would say with the rise of AI, we need to start questioning the purpose of education and even moving the goalposts, not just of how we teach, but changing what we teach. Many of the things we're teaching, many of the things that we're aiming to learn, we don't even need to learn anymore because AI is going to do it for us. We can learn a little bit of it, but then rely on AI. Just like when the calculator came around, we don't do long multiplication over and over. 40 years ago, everybody needed to do all the addition and multiplication in their lives they needed to do by hand. Now you use a phone or a calculator to do it. You still learn it in math class, but you're like, as soon as you learn this, all right, you're done. Now let the calculator do that for you. The same is going to happen with lots of other skills where you learn the basics in school, but you don't need to memorize it, because after you got it inside you, you can rely on AI to do things for you. And I think changing really not just how we learn, but what it is that we need to learn is going to be pretty important. Less memorization, less rote repetition. When I was growing up, homework meant doing something over and over again until you got good at it.
Yeah.
You know what? The rote repetition stuff, computers are going to be doing the things that are rote repetitive.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like I obviously ChatGPT is something I use as a marketer regularly, and I imagine having that as a student and how dangerous that could be, right? Like just basically not having to do too much. So I think it's a matter of like.
But let me ask you this:
cool, right?
If you imagine a school where it's cheating to use AI.
Exactly.
Now you as a marketer, you have two different graduates. One of them basically did all the reading and all the work to get good grades. The other one is a whiz at learning how to do anything and everything using AI, and gets it done way faster. And you have a choice. You can only hire one of them. Which one sounds like the more attractive candidate to you?
Yeah, I think exactly right. Like there just has to be almost like a generational adjustment to how we educate and how we use it as a tool. Just like, the calculator when that kind of came out, maybe.
By the way, I'm not suggesting we don't teach the regular.
Oh yeah, of course.
But it needs to, there's almost no more important skill we can teach kids than learning how to be creators with technology.
I'd love to, I'm sure this is a really passionate portion of your, code.org focus. I'd love to ask you about, as an immigrant yourself, you've done a lot to help girls who code and underrepresented minorities as well. How has that kind of come about for you? What are some future goals you might have from that?
So computer science is interesting in that almost every group of students is underrepresented in computer science. There's such a small percentage of people learning it that almost all of us are the underrepresented. In many other subjects, you could say only certain groups are underrepresented, but basically girls are underrepresented, Black students are underrepresented, Latino students are underrepresented, low-income students are underrepresented, rural students are underrepresented. So in a country like the United States, roughly 90% of the population are underrepresented in computer science. The greatest way to right the wrong, or to balance that out, is by teaching this as part of the school system so that everybody has access. But just providing access isn't enough, because this is a field that has been for so long dominated by white and Asian men that we need to go the extra mile to make sure girls feel welcome, feel included, so that Black or Latino students see role models. So they see folks like Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva, who's a woman and is one of the most successful female CEOs of all time, or they see Black entrepreneurs or Latino entrepreneurs as role models, as examples, to know that this isn't just a field for sort of the nerdy white teenage boy, but for really anybody of any age can become a creator with computer science. That's really, really near and dear to my heart. My daughter started learning on code.org when she was 4 years old, and she's now, she's in a program that is doing computer science in high school. But it makes me very happy to see how confident she is in her coding skills, and I hope that with time it'll reach a point where this next generation doesn't think of technology as something that's only for the few.
Shouldn't be a limiter. I love that you kind of focused on that. You've been at the leadership helm of a lot of companies, a lot of different boards and startups, and Code.org, obviously. What's your leadership principles that you want to share? Like, what's something that consistently you bring to a new company or to a new advisory position that you really like to pass on?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. That's a great question. One is that a great leader needs to be is really an act of service. Being a great leader isn't, for me, just saying do this, do that, do this, but is really like demonstrating themselves and being a doer themselves. My second thought, which comes right out of that, is that a great leader, especially in technology, needs to be in the details rather than just like, I'm just going to give you the high level vision and then you all go off and do your things. Great leaders know how to hone in on things to like get them just right. Just like Steve Jobs very personally worked on all sorts of details of the iPod or the iPhone, even though he was managing, almost 100,000 people in the company. The things that mattered, he'd get into the details, and I think getting into the details is really important. And then my third thought is that big visions are almost easier than small visions. It's much better to dream big. It's easier to rally people around a big vision as long as you have the persistence to stick with it until you realize it. Our vision at Code.org was that every student in every school should learn computer science. That's not a small vision. It's a global change of the multi-trillion-dollar global education system, but it's something that basically inspires people to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because especially in businesses, it's just you get stuck in the perpetual growth. Like, oh, well, we need to raise revenue 10%. Like, it's just not as like you said, motivational. So having those visions and how you get there is really cool. I'd love to break into a little bit of just the differences between the companies you've run and the nonprofit. Like what was kind of an adjustment for you and how that kind of leads to people that are thinking they may want to take the social impact route versus traditional corporation route.
So the first thing I'd say is traditional corporations can have social impact. And in fact, I think it's better to start by thinking, what footprint do you want to leave in the world, rather than do you want to do a corporation or a nonprofit? Like, what's the change you want to create? What's the service you want to provide to society? And then decide, is it better to do that for profit or nonprofit? And I can guarantee you, if there's a for-profit way of doing it, it's better to do it that way. It'll be much, much easier to reach scale. It's very hard to scale an idea in a nonprofit route. With Code.org, the reason I made it nonprofit is we wanted to do things that would be just really difficult for a for-profit to do. For-profits have a struggle with basically reforming education policies. We wanted to change the actual education policies of the world. It's hard to make money doing that, and if you have a for-profit incentive, it's hard to get trust from governments. And we also wanted to get Bill Gates delivering video lectures for our students, or let students write the code to control the Star Wars droids. You can't license Bill Gates or Star Wars as a for-profit startup, but as a nonprofit, you can get those things as we've been getting those benefits for free because we're not making any money off of it.
Really
but for any of your listeners who are thinking, about the balance, it should be first about what change you want to create, what service do you want to provide to society. And for me, even though Code.org is structured as a nonprofit, I try to make the culture as much like a for-profit as possible, meaning let's measure our outcomes. Let's figure out what has the highest return on investment. Let's try to keep costs low. Let's worry about 10% growth. Even though our vision is a big vision, we need to know the way we get there is through percentages and things like that. Lots of nonprofits have more of a sort of a feel-good culture. And it's great to feel good, but a feel-good culture, what I mean by that is like everybody's part of a happy family and every idea is good and everybody gets a pat on the back. And if you have too much of that, then you don't really have excellence. whereas for-profits have a little bit more of a championship team mindset, meaning like we want the best of the best, and if you don't make the cut, then you're out. And for me, running code.org has been much more of trying to keep that championship team culture. We're aiming for changing the world, but we can't. That means we can't just say that every mistake is okay. Some mistakes aren't okay, and we need to sort of have accountability.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you brought in, because there are obviously so many benefits to having the corporate structure and kind of bringing in goal structure and other things to drive a nonprofit business. What do you kind of, let's say if you could design the ideal classroom at 2035, what would it look like? How would technology fit into that vision? And the ever changing landscape. This is your chance to look into a crystal ball and make it exactly the way you want it.
I mean, there's a difference between predicting what will happen versus what I wish would happen. So I'll tell you what I wish would be possible, but I don't know if it's going to be 2035. So we're talking 10 years. In my dream classroom, the focus is much more on creativity and projects and less on memorization and sort of like you have to learn this, and then you have to learn that, and then you have to learn that. And with a lot more technology and a lot more collaboration. So in other words, instead of first we're going to learn math, then we're going to learn history, make sure you memorize all of those things, then we're going to, instead it should be like, what do you want to make today? We have 7 projects, get on teams. One project is an app project, another project is a movie project, another is a music project, another one is start your own business. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Like school should be startup school. People talk about nobody teaches entrepreneurship. I'm almost not sure there's anything more important that we can teach than creativity and entrepreneurship, which are kind of the same thing. So if people graduated from school learning how to make an app, how to make a movie, how to start a new business, how to write a book, things like that, how to make things, they'll learn the math along the way. They'll learn reading and writing. All the other sort of skills we want to teach kids, they would learn, but in the context of creativity.
Okay, I love that.
AI should be a tool, not sort of cheating. It's like use everything you got to use the internet, use AI, do it however you make it.
I love that. It's really, and again, that's almost like a corporate principle. It's more outcome driven than input driven. So it's like, what is your outcome that you're hoping to do with learning the math? And then that's going to drive their desire to actually do that. I love that. Looking back on your career, what's one lesson or experience that you've had the greatest impact on your journey? And this is kind of how we'll wrap things up with a nice little bow.
My biggest lesson has been that big visions are almost easier to pursue, and it's just almost contrarian. You usually think crawl, then walk, then run. And with code.org, we took a different approach. We said, when we launched the Hour of Code, we said we want to get 10 million students to learn in 1 week. And I basically said, let's just shoot straight for the stars. And we were at that point a 5-person company. We were just getting off the ground floor. And I realized that with a very big vision, it is a lot easier to get everybody aligned. People come out of the woodwork to help you. If you look at SpaceX, if Elon Musk was just saying we're going to make space travel cheaper, that's not as big a vision as making humanity a multi-planetary species. The bigger vision gets people just root for that to succeed. Even people who don't like Elon Musk, they're like, but I do want humanity to be multi-planetary. Like that's kind of cool. So my top lesson has been to make a big, bold vision. And it takes courage. It takes courage to say that this is what I'm about. I'm going to make this happen. For me, starting code.org and saying we're going to make every student in every school learn computer science, and then sticking with it for 12 years, that's not easy. It takes courage and bravery and persistence. But I think it's one of the most critical elements of success.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time and definitely for starting code.org. Again, I'm a big fan. And we're grateful that you were able to join Inside the Workflow today.
Thank you so much.